Welcome everyone to Brothers and Boss Battles, a video game showdown. Today we continue our discussion about games that initially debuted on the Sega Dreamcast. And today that game is Resident Evil Code Veronica. Tom, why don't you start us off with initial thoughts this time?
All right, let's do it. So, people who know me know that I am a big Resident Evil fan. Um, but having said that, I haven't played one of this original like style Resident Evil games in quite a while. And by that I mean like, the old tank controls with the, fixed camera angles and all that and, the non over the shoulder stuff. So I hadn't played one of those in a long time. And, that kind of gave me some doubt that, like, are these going to be as good as I remembered them from when I was young? So I went in kind of with that mindset. And I don't want to give away too much here, but just setting the stage a little bit. I did play this originally, actually on the not on the Dreamcast, but on the GameCube when it was ported. Because for some reason the GameCube is where I really played all the Resident Evil games. Um, so that's what, but that was a long time ago that I played it, and I did remember liking this game a lot. Um, and for this replay through for the preparation for this episode, I played the PS4 version, which is Code Veronica X, but we'll get into the differences there. But there aren't too many as far as gameplay is concerned.
All right, Pete, why don't you go?
Yeah, so I really don't know what to say. I mean, it's not a terrible game. I mean, it's a pretty decent game. I would even call it, but I personally didn't have a ton of fun playing it. Um, Now I'm not the most seasoned Resident Evil veteran player, but I just feel like a lot of the Resident Evil games, at least especially like the earlier ones, which are the ones that I'm more familiar with, I feel like there's like a little bit of convolution to obtaining the necessary items. There's like a good amount of backtracking, a lot of running around the map to find what you need next, or run back to an item box if you forgot something. Anyway, so those things are all part of Resident Evil, I feel, and Resident Evil is a very good and popular series. But I just felt like in this game, it seemed like everything, like all these little annoyances that I feel are annoyances, were just heightened more than in the other games. So it felt a little bit more like a chore than some other Resident Evil games, in my opinion. And I'm curious if you guys agree with that, but I'm sure we'll clear that up as we go through the episode.
Yeah, and for my initial thoughts, I really like this game. I think it's incredibly underrated as a Resident Evil game, likely largely due to the fact that it was on the Sega Dreamcast. And as we all know, that didn't sell as well as it otherwise probably should have, at least based on games available for it and technical aspects and things like that. But um, I really liked it. It sort of continues on the story of Claire Redfield and Chris Redfield, and we'll talk about it more. I don't want to get too bogged down with the specifics and the initial thoughts, but I really liked it. I think it's a great entry in the Resident Evil catalog. Before we get started, like with our review, I just kind of want to go through the basics. For those that don't know, I'll just quickly say Brothers and Boss Battles, a video game showdown, our podcast here. We take a game, we take a category or genre of games. We pick three games that fit within that genre or category, discuss it once per week. And then in the fourth episode of that grouping, we have our Bro Down episode because we're all brothers here. And we compare them and eventually pick a winner. So, as I had mentioned at the outset, we're talking about games that debuted on the Sega Dreamcast. Last episode, we discussed Shenmue, and today is Resident Evil Code Veronica. And Code Veronica initially released in Japan on February 3rd, 2000. Then in North America on the Dreamcast, it released on March 28th, 2000. And then shortly thereafter, they made Code Veronica X, which included some uh, extra uh, like cutscenes and was able to they were looking to port it to different systems because the Dreamcast wasn't selling well. So there was a version of Code Veronica X in Japan that was released, but in North America it was released for the PlayStation 2 on August 22nd, 2001. on the GameCube in North America on December 3rd, 2003, and then PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 on September 27th, 2011. And then, as Tom mentioned, it was later ported to PlayStation 4 as well. And most of the games that people would pick up and play now of this game would be Code Veronica X, I would believe. So uh, that's in fact what I played in my most recent playthrough. I played on the PS4 version that I think Tom referenced before. We did have this for Dreamcast initially, um, but we played that quite a many years ago.
Yeah, and I also played the Code Veronica X version on my Xbox.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess since we're talking about Code Veronica X, you want to maybe touch a little bit on what the differences are. I mean, I've looked it up a little bit, and as far as I can tell, it was mostly revolving around cutscenes that included a certain character, a
certain
certain
infam an infamous
a certain
character.
sunglassed character from
Yes.
the original Resident Evil game.
And before we reveal who that is, we'll give our spoiler alert warning. We will this game is pretty story rich, I feel, and Resident Evil in general is even if it is a pretty basic story. So, we'll try not to go into every nook and cranny, but we will be talking a little bit about the story and some cutscenes and otherwise important parts of the game. So, just here's your spoiler warning. You've been warned. So, who is that
Oh,
sunglassed character?
I don't know if that's actually a word, but of course it is none other than Albert Wesker.
That's right. Yeah. So from what I can gather, the difference between the original and Code Veronica X is essentially cutscenes, mostly involving Wesker. There's the one where you initially see him, where he sort of sneaks up behind Claire when she's like right outside of one of the buildings, and then when the scene where he's facing Alexia. Those are like
Yeah,
two of the main.
yeah. I think they wanted to basically make Code Veronica more like just tie it to the main series, like the main, a little bit better than
Yeah.
just having like Claire and Chris in it. Like they wanted to like kind of build up or
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
this was I think supposed to really be Resident Evil 3. It like this was
Yes,
supposed
that's what
to
I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And because it wasn't on like PlayStation, they didn't want to call it 3. They wanted to make because it was on another system, they didn't want to use the sequential numbering system. So they made this Code Veronica X, but it really is the next in line after Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, but I think when it was going to be three, it was different main characters that you would play. Um, and then they wanted because it was kind of like a spin-off, they wanted it to be a familiar character from a previous game, right? But then maybe then you guys could tell me because I'm not familiar with three.
Yeah, 3
I,
is
I
mainly starring Jill Valentine, who was
oh
in
okay,
Resident Evil 1 with Chris.
yeah,
So, just for those that don't know, Code Veronica involves Claire Redfield, who obviously was one of the two co-protagonists in Resident Evil 2, looking for her brother, who is believed to be in tracking down Umbrella Corporation, who is sort of the big bad corporation behind everything that's going on with the zombie and monster outbreaks. She winds up being captured and brought to this island prison that Umbrella, for some reason, controls, and then that
doesn't every pharmaceutical company have a prison?
yeah, and maybe who knows, but but then the prison is attacked by a group. We find out it's later a group headed by Wesker, who's trying to extract the virus from a character on that island. And there's also an outbreak, so Claire has to kind of fight her way through that. So that's sort of like the basic premise of the game. Um, I like this. This game is a little. It's pretty unique. I mean, it still sort of follows that old uh, Resident Evil formula of tank controls and retracing your steps once you get a certain item to open certain doors or areas. So it really has that survival horror feel. and it was the first, I believe, Resident Evil game to use 3D backgrounds instead of the pre-rendered backgrounds. So that allowed some play with the camera angles, which they really played up in this to try to create more tension and fear from the player.
To jump in on that, like yeah, I read that too, but and there are some points where you walk and the camera shifts a little bit, but
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it felt very much like the pre-rendered backgrounds. I mean, other than like these little like points where it would shift a little bit, but I don't know. I don't feel like that really added much.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. This has nothing to do with
I
like
mean,
the
I'm sure it
backgrounds.
was, yeah, I'm sure it was, a technical achievement to be proud of at the time, but
Mm.
I don't know that it really added too much value to the game.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to see the difference, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely felt a lot more like the previous games than anything that we know, like in 2024.
I mean, I don't know if this has to do with the 3D backgrounds, but there was, speaking of them trying to build tension through camera work and things like that, like there were times where Claire would be going up the stairs and it would take an extra long pause. Like she would be walking very slowly and you would hear the heartbeat going. So like they tried to, imply that something was going to jump out at you once you got to the other side of that. Because, for those that have only played new Resident Evil games and the older ones, when you opened the door, it was sort of like a loading screen in the sense that you would just get a close up of the door and it opening. It wasn't just you could pop in and out of doors and pop up and down stairs like the newer games. So a lot of that was technical limitations, but it also did kind of create tension and sort of became an iconic like scene of those early Resident Evil games, and that continued in this. But there were other scenes. I remember there was one where you're sort of uh, you're going up a small staircase, and when you're doing that, the camera shifts to underneath the staircase as if there's something under there, like watching Claire move and stuff. So they created some tension with that. I mean, sometimes it might have been a little forced, but it was still kind of cool.
Yeah, it was cool, and I think playing it, when it was first released, probably would have been especially cool.
So Pete, you mentioned like you sort of lukewarm on this. Like anything in particular that maybe we could discuss?
Yeah, lots of things in particular. So I don't know. I kind of mentioned. I just feel like a lot of things that are probably just very common and enjoyable in Resident Evil games just felt a little too much in this one. So for an example, I called it backtracking. I guess it's not really backtracking, right? Because you're in some area and you're trying to find things, and then you go back to open a door or whatever it might be, right? That's kind of good classic survival horror, I think. But in this game, and maybe this is just a fault in the way my brain works because I'm not really familiar with these types of games, but you kind of go from one kind of main area and you work your way and find the key to get to the next main area. And I just felt like you had to, there were times where you had to backtrack like very, very far, like going back to where you were playing like hours and hours ago. I don't know if
Yeah,
you guys felt
yeah.
that
I
way.
mean,
Like
I
it
think
wasn't
that
like, okay, now I'm in like in Resident Evil
Yeah,
2, I'm in this
I
police
think it
station.
because they kind
Yeah.
of broke up the locations where they had like the
Yes.
training facility and then they had the whatever the private residence. I think it was
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
private residence
Ashford.
evil.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so Resident Evil 2, the original was, it obviously had that element of backtracking and all of that, but it was a little bit more linear even for a survival horror backtracking game than like this one was. This really, you were kind of going back and forth to all the spots. I didn't find the map to be too humongous. But you start out sort of like in that little prison area and then the graveyard, but then there is the training facility and then the Ashford mansion and you know, um stuff like
Antarctica.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Well, then
that's
well,
different because
that's
you can't go
Yeah.
separate.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's true. Yeah.
that is completely separate.
just the
Yeah.
part the part with the submarine and you go
Hmm.
to the other.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
even sure what that was called, but yeah, that other area,
yeah. I mean,
submarine area.
honestly, I think it's fair to say that this Resident Evil game was the most sort of you know backtracking slash Metroidvania slash whatever. But
Yeah,
like,
I mean, because it didn't all take place in one. Like up to this point, like Resident Evil 1 was pretty much all in the mansion, right? And then Resident Evil 2 was pretty much all in the police station until you get to
The
the
lab.
lab.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think because this one had it was more like outdoorsy.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
like they clearly took like the Ashford mansion was very similar to the mansion in Resident Evil 1, but that's because there's the connection because the Ashfords like founded Umbrella and that was part of part of the lore that you learn. And Tom, I remember in the Resident Evil 2 when we discussed that game, you mentioned how it didn't really progress the overall lore of Resident Evil like that much, but I feel like Code Veronica really did.
Yeah, definitely. With introducing the whole Ashford family and their role in creating Umbrella and just kind of establishing like a new, I guess, was it variant of the virus that,
Yeah.
Wesker is after and obviously bringing Wesker back into it. Yeah. So yeah, definitely I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game had some really great characters too. Um, and we can, I don't know if you guys want to get into that now or maybe talk about more other stuff for now because the characters, we'll have to talk a little bit about the story, I think, a little bit to get into the
yeah,
characters really well.
yeah. Let's stick with some more gameplay stuff now, maybe.
All right, so what else regarding the gameplay?
Okay, so another thing, and again, this is really true of most, if not all, the Resident Evil. So I'm not sure. It just seemed worse in this one, and I think maybe this game is harder than, more difficult than a lot of the Resident Evils. I'm not sure how you guys feel, but
Oh, mm,
the the whole, I'm sure we'll talk about this, the inventory management, and I just hate I just hate the system in Resident Evil, and it doesn't really add strategy because you don't know what's coming next. I don't know if I need three empty spots. I don't know if I need heavy artillery. I don't, or healing items or blue herb or whatever. It's just it's the strategy is like luck.
That's part of the realism or like the suspense and the making the player feel uneasy, like you don't know what you're gonna need. So it's like, do you
But
play it
it's
safe and bring in, a lot of ammo and healing items, or do you know, just try to carry carry as little as possible so that you have room for
but
whatever
it,
it is.
so
yeah,
not really. And then there's all these
Maybe not really.
and there's all these. Well, I'll tell you why. First, there's all these key items too. Do I need this hand valve or this that? And it's like, so that's my first comment. And then it's not really like that because if you go in there and you die, whatever, then it's like, okay, I'm just gonna start over now. And
Well, yeah,
95% of the
that's not how
time
you're
you were
supposed to
at
play
a
the game, though.
at 95% of the time you were at an item box, you were at a typewriter. So no, but yeah,
no, but
no, you're supposed to play the game. Exactly, that's the point though. So they made me go in with with
yeah,
un un.
but that's the thing. Then
It's what
you
does it
have to
add?
take
It doesn't add
longer.
anything. You're guessing.
You have to
You're,
take longer. You have to go back. You may have to fight through enemies to go back and get the item you need. I mean, that's the point. The
or you just
point
start
isn't to
over, or
make
you
it
just die.
the point isn't to make it as easy as possible. You're not watching a movie. Like it's
No,
supposed to have
it's not about
it's
being
supposed
easy as possible. It's about making a decision based on just gut feel, basically, on what to bring, and then maybe you advance 20 minutes and you realize what you brought was not what you needed to bring, and what you needed to bring you is left in the box. So
yeah.
it's like you end up
Now you
dying
have
or
to
But
starting
that's
over. Now you
but you
just
ha
it's just wasting 20 minutes,
it's
it's
and
not
it's not based on
wasting
any
wasting.
though.
skill. It's literally based on, oh, I hope I guess right this time and bring the right
But
stuff.
that's
Look,
but that's adds to the. I mean, something you don't understand about these kinds of games is that they're trying to put you in the position of like, what would you do if you were in this situation, They're trying to
yeah,
make it like a realistic situation where
yeah,
you have to make a choice. If you
it's
were faced with this in your real life, you would have to choose.
But it
yeah,
doesn't
and it's
So
work
not
in the
at
because
games, making you
Pete. Wait,
choose.
but hold on. But it's not every game is Pac-Man where it's like, okay, let's see what my high score can be, and there's no consequence to anything else. It's just like how like skilled am I at doing this? Like this is testing different skills while also like adding
no.
a story element to it. Because look, I gotta say, people are not gonna say, oh, I played all this time and I have the wrong item. Let me start over. I've never once have played a Resident Evil game like that. I said, "Oh, damn, I got to this point and I don't have the right item. I'm gonna have to backtrack to a box now, and maybe I'm gonna get killed by a zombie in backtracking. Maybe I make it through and then make it back, okay." But I never said, "Okay, I'm gonna shut the game off and load my game back on just so I don't have to go back and forth." I've literally never done that.
But if
So,
you
like, I
didn't
mean, you're
really
saying
achieve
you would
that
do that.
much,
Well,
then
I
you
don't
would.
know.
especially if you just like wasted a bunch of bullets or something. Like I don't know. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all.
But the
Yeah, I
thing
mean,
about
it's something
waste,
you can do.
No, but
yeah,
it's not
the thing about
you were talking
wasting
about
bullets
it's
though,
not
it's like if you kill that enemy now, you won't have to. Like, I think you have to assume you're going to be going. You're not just going to
that
go in one area twice. You're going to be going
yeah,
back and forth 10 times. So
that
if you
was another
kill,
complaint I had about this game is I felt like you had to you were going to go to this every single room or area 1,000 times because of all the running back and forth. So you basically had to kill everybody. Like at first, I was trying to be selective. Like, oh, I'm guessing again. I won't have to come back here too much, or I could probably avoid them, a couple of times. But it turns out that wasn't the case, and you
but
basically just had to wipe everyone.
that's part of the strategy though, because if you go to a room and there's only one item and you pick it up, then you probably won't have to go back to that room. And that's part of the
Mm.
strategy. Okay, I'll leave those. I'll run around these three zombies and not waste my bullets. But this
Yeah,
next room,
I definitely
That,
didn't kill everyone in the game.
but that's another thing. You're right. You might have gone to a room, picked up an item or two, and don't have to go back there again. But at least for me, the game was pretty hard, and you're probably gonna end up going back there like 3 or 4 more times because you're kind of checking for things and figuring out what you have to do. Like, yeah, if you play the game before and then it's a lot easier, obviously. But
yeah. I mean, I have played this before, but I gotta say I don't really remember it from that time. So it kind of was like a fresh playthrough for me. But to your point about the difficulty, I'll say this: I felt this Resident Evil was there was a ton of bad guys, and they it was hard to always kill. Like sometimes I felt like you just had to get bit and then like do the thing where you push them off and run past them. Like I felt that happened a lot, but and I don't know if this is technically true or not, but I also felt that your character, which is mainly Claire for the game, was a lot tankier than in like Resident Evil 1 and 2, let's say.
I
Like
felt that.
meaning she took a lot more hits before
Yeah,
being killed than in the past. That's how I felt. So like there were like a lot of enemies, but I also felt that she took a lot more damage.
yeah, I felt like I should have been dying quicker than I was.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of scaled with the game a little bit because like I remember at the beginning, I guess when you're in the graveyard part and there's like a ton of zombies there. I feel like I got bitten, I don't know, maybe like at least twice, but I think maybe even 3 times. And like I think I was still, green health.
Mm. Yeah. I so
But like
apparent.
that's right at the beginning of the game, and
Yeah.
I think later on they kind of maybe adjusted to do more damage.
Well, they do throw you in pretty early because that part, which I think you're referencing like that graveyard scene, it's
Yeah.
like,
How'd you know when I said the word graveyard?
oh, sorry, I just I didn't hear that word. But like you don't have a gun at that point, I don't think. So like all you have is the knife, and like I just instinctively didn't use the knife because it's like utterly useless in the other games. But apparently in this game it actually is kind of strong.
Yeah, I
So
don't think I
people
used it.
Yeah, so people were kind of using it to. I've seen through YouTube playthroughs and stuff like trying to, being able to use it in this game to greater effect than in past.
Yeah, so you mentioned how a lot of the game you're playing as Claire. So another thing that I didn't really like that relates to the not strategy and the luck is like depositing, like when you're like whether items are you're holding items or whether they're in the item box before you switch to controlling the other character.
Well, we'll just say it. I mean, spoiler alert again, but you eventually take control of Chris Redfield in this game, which was cool because you got the siblings in this. It's the first time they're acting, together in one of these Resident Evil games. But go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, no, so there's just that one point where again, you're not really sure what's coming, so you might as Claire when the second time you're kind of Claire, maybe you equip or you take your Magnum gun and bullets with you. Then it turns out you don't really need that, and now you're Chris to fight off the end of the game, but now you don't have your Magnum gun, and it's like again, there's just no way of really knowing when the big battle is going to come and when you're going to be who, and
It's part of the strategy.
it's not strategy, it's just luck.
It is because you have to like consider if I take this, it's not going to be available to someone else.
Yeah, but you don't know if the big battle is coming now or if it's going to come later or if you're going to have an opportunity to
Yeah.
switch again later or deposit your items again later. You don't know any of that. So it's not
Well,
really strategy at that
let's say
point.
there was a zombie outbreak and you had to fight a flying insect
Yes.
like
And
BOW. How would you know when to take out your Magnum?
you wouldn't. And in real life, sometimes you have to make decisions based on no information. When it's a game, it's not fun.
I think it makes it fun.
I guess I like having to use strategy, but not just blindly guess. But and
That's
I don't know.
life.
So that's a problem. Slice of life. I mean, this problem is, I think, a general issue that I have with Resident Evil series. And again, I'm not a veteran, but I just feel like it was more prevalent in this game, like these kinds of things that I'm mentioning.
Yeah, that one I kind of agree with you on though, the item stuff. Just because you can really mess yourself up if you're not expecting that. And that
Yeah,
that wasn't something that had been a part of the series prior to this game. Like you weren't switching between characters during a single playthrough.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the Magnum, just as a quick aside, it's like that you need to basically carry with you, or at least in your the magic box, the extinguisher, which you use very early on, and then it becomes non-usable anymore unless you recharge it, and you have to like put out a fire in a room much later in the game to get the Magnum. So that's which I did. So it's like that does feel rewarding, but you can lose out on the Magnum if you like just happen to say, "Oh, I used the fire extinguisher. I don't need to use it anymore. Let me just leave it around." But I always, the first time I ever played a Resident Evil game was Resident Evil 2, and I kept all of the keys, even though like you know
Even
now
though
in
I
the new
tell you you don't need it anymore.
yeah, exactly. So so I'm that type. So I had kept the fire extinguisher and figured out that you could recharge it in a room later on and stuff. So it worked out. But
Yeah,
I
but
just
this
had
was
to.
different because they don't tell you like, oh, do you want to discard it or anything, right? I think
No.
I just kept it and threw it in the box.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean this game, there's also that cool little thing at the beginning where you can't allow metal. Like if you have metal on you, it shuts down a corridor, so you have to like put it in that special case, and that kind of creates a different type of gameplay for you there, because like you have at points where you don't have any weapons, and you just have like that alloy thing you need to open a new door. I'm guessing you didn't like that.
Yeah, I thought it was a little funny, but it's kind of like shoehorned in there, so you had to make that alloy that wasn't detectable.
Yeah,
But it was fine.
I think I think that what that does more than anything is create tension. It's like, oh, I'm hearing all of these zombie moans and just had to fight a bunch, and now I don't have any weapons on me. So it's I think
Yeah, we talked about this with Callisto Protocol actually when they was like crawling through vents. Like because they took away all my guns, I wasn't concerned because it's like
but
they're
I
not gonna
think
make me face
No,
10 zombies.
you run into enemies
yeah.
here without any of your weapons.
I think it's after you make
Yeah, it's on
the
this
key item, then they break through the wall or not the
right.
wall, the
The
windows or
windows,
whatever.
yeah.
Oh, I don't really remember that. Maybe if you navigate fast or something. But anyway, it's not going to be a situation where you won't be able to handle it without the gun, I guess.
Well, it could have been in this case, but I mean, they didn't make it particularly difficult, so
No, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
but they
If they're
could
taking
have.
away your gun, then I don't know. Well, maybe that's another thing. I didn't know it was coming, and I just got lucky by not being concerned because I figured nothing was going to happen. But yeah, there's a lot of puzzles in this game.
And we'll get to that, but first, let's give our answers to last week's mid-episode filler would you rather question. All right, and I'd like to go through the results on our polling on this question. So, with a whopping 69% of our listeners, the play games at the arcade option won. Not a surprise there, since Shenmue is a video game itself. But thanks for those that participated. Get a drink at the bar came in second place by a lot, but we can understand that one too. Got some good comments too. We just like to read from a few of the listeners. Johnny Bennis at Dope Beans wrote, "Have a drink at the Heartbeats bar. Parentheses, not welcome there. A pizza at Bob's Pizza, and then play a bit of Hang On in You Arcade." And that sounds like a good night. Um, just to read another reply, this game evokes a lot of positive emotions from a lot of people. So one of them on our YouTube page wrote, with a handle of AK Gangster Gaming, wrote that Shenmue was 10,000% revolutionary for its time. He says he remembers walking around the town, just picking things up and looking at them. Seeing fully modeled, movable, and searchable objects was insane at a time when most companies were still trying to figure out how to do 3D. Shenmue has so many of gaming first. It may have failed on a commercial level, but it pushed gaming 5 years ahead with what it managed to accomplish. He writes he'll always have the most special place in his heart for Shenmue 1 and 2. Yokosuka and Hong Kong are like my real home. And he says he never felt so safe and surreal than when playing Shenmue. And that's just a great set of comments there. It really is that important of a game to people, and we totally get it. And we totally thank you for your comment. Check out our social media for that on X and Instagram at Bros Boss Battles. But as far as our answers, we'll quickly run through those now. Tom, what would you do?
So I approach this from the angle of going to confront the Mad Angels. So I decided to go grab a drink at the bar to give myself some liquid courage for that.
That's a good one. I actually kind of thought that too, but I have to kind of go with the main theme of this podcast here and say I'd go to the arcade. Though the liquid courage was a sort of on my mind as well. Pete?
I was thinking I would go to the bar, grab a brewski, and maybe catch the baseball game or the football game if that was on. That's what I would do.
All right. Sounds good. Again, see us on our Instagram and X accounts at Bros Boss Battles. You can interact with us on our website at brothersandbossbattles.com. Leave a message on our YouTube account or wherever you get this podcast. All right, now back to the regular show. All right, welcome back. Before the break, we were going to discuss the puzzles in this game. And Pete, you brought that up, so why don't you start us off with that?
Yeah. I mean, before we get into specifics, do you either of you guys have any opinions just broadly about the quantity and quality of the puzzles in this game?
Well, I'll go. I mean, I think there was, in true good survival horror fashion, in my opinion, there were a sufficient amount of puzzles here to fit well within that category. There are two puzzles that stand out to me. One being pretty cool, and the other one being a little bit annoying. And
I have
maybe
two like that as well.
yeah. Um, why don't we? I'll say them, and
Say
maybe
them
the
at count to three and say them at the same
no,
time.
we won't do that. We talk over each other enough, I think, in
Well,
this.
let's start with the cool one.
Okay. All right. Do you want me to go, or do you want to say what you
Yeah,
think
go
it's?
ahead, go ahead.
So I think the one where there's the various paintings of your ancestors and little clues about them to pick the order in which you have to press the button underneath the painting. I think that's like really cool, and it makes you have to think and really listen to what you're reading or comprehend what you're reading in order to get the proper order.
That was my cool one as well. That
Wow, I'm shocked.
that no, it really stood out. Like
Yeah.
it was interesting. And I guess something else that I liked about it was that it brought in Resident Evil lore to the puzzle, which I'm like a sucker for. But it was cool. It was like it was like a nice word puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
And
also
it's
like
cool. Lineage things I think are cool, and especially in this game when we start discussing the story, I think it becomes, even more apparent that that was such a big part of this game.
I also like this puzzle because it's like I don't know, it's a true puzzle in the way I think of puzzles. Like you're in this room and you have this like task and you have to figure it out. It's not like obtuse or any other word and that you could think of. So I like that one too. So what was your guys' annoying puzzle?
So it was the one where there's that for some reason the item you need, I think it was a key card inside of a crystal ball inside of a cannon, and you had to uh, find
Yes.
it and then have that giant slab crush the crystal ball in order to get the card out of it. But that if you but that giant slab would kill you. It was a one-shot kill basically if you got trapped underneath it, and it would crush you instead of the ball. So like that was it was just weird. It was just like it seemed very forced. Like eventually you figure it out, and it's not like that bad. But anyway, you guys go. It seems like you
Yeah,
guys agree with me on that.
yeah, that one was annoying. It was kind of out of place for a game, like for a Resident Evil game. Like I feel
Yeah.
like that's not really.
Yeah, for those that don't know, it's like you had to find this ball, and then there's this contraption that is making this giant slab of concrete go up and down, but it's triggered by movement. So like you would go underneath it, and then like a second later, it would drop and crush whatever was underneath. So it was obvious that that's how you had to get the card out of this crystal ball. But I mean, you would have to hold the crystal ball, place it nicely in the center of where that giant slab crushes, and then back away, and then it would, basically barely miss you, but then crush the key card. And then inexplicably, when you pick up the key card, the slab locks in place and it no longer crushes you, which I mean is good in the sense that you won't get an unfair one hit kill, but it's like it doesn't make any sense.
So I did get killed once by that, trying to
Yeah.
put the ball
Me
down.
too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because it was you really had to be close.
Yeah, and the controls are also like it
Yeah.
made more sense to back away as opposed to like turn and run. Even though like your instinct I think would be to turn and run because you run faster than you back away. But anyway, that's how I did it. Um, were those the was Tom, was that the ridiculous puzzle that you had in
That's not
mind?
no, that's not the one I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
My other one, it's not really ridiculous. It's just like it was kind of just like, oh yeah, like that that kind of thing. So it was the one where uh you have to change. This is in the Antarctica section. You have to change the valve from a square to an octagon to like
Yeah,
shut off the
yeah,
poison gas. And it was just like there was that random machine that I guess
yeah.
Oh yeah.
changes like the metal, just like
Hmm.
shaper or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was gonna bring that up. Yeah.
yeah. That
Kind
one,
of,
I
kind of
didn't
annoying.
like that one.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess. I mean,
there were some. So you had to. Sorry, Anne, were you gonna
well, I was going to
talk more
mention
about
the
that one?
one. It's not. No, no.
Oh, okay.
The other. Hold your thought. And this might also be part of what you want to talk about. It's not really a puzzle per se, but it was the one when you eventually find a shotgun and you take it off the wall, and it's one of those things where when you take it off the wall, it makes something in the level move. So in this case, if you take the shotgun off of this thing that it's on, the staircase nearby goes up, and that allows you to go to a different area. So it was a puzzle in the sense that sometimes you had to take the shotgun off just so you could go to a particular area, not even to you that you needed the shotgun, but just so you could get to a different part. And then, similarly would have to engage the staircase by putting the shotgun back on. So that was, I feel like there's always this, take a weapon off the wall and it does something in Resident Evil games. And there's a couple of those actually in this. That there's another one with Steve and the Golden Lugers.
Yeah, so that part that you're referring to, that cost me a lot of time because it was kind of near the end of that whole sequence, but I knew where I had to get, and I knew how to get there quite easily from underneath that staircase. But the staircase was up, so I had to figure out the second way to get there, and it took me so long. You end up having to go like back outside somewhere and take this like that little yellow lift thing that goes down,
Yeah.
and it just took me so long to remember that.
So what were some of the other puzzles? It sounded like you had a couple others in mind that you wanted
No,
to talk
the one I was gonna mention was when you had to set the temperature when you were combining those chemicals, I guess.
about. Yeah.
And the temperature was had to be set to the date of the completion of the facility. So when you're in that kind of like office room, whatever it was, it had the model of the facility, I guess, and
Mhm.
like there was some little placard that had some little information that mentioned it. But
Yep.
like, I didn't remember. I didn't remember.
So you
Like
have to
too
go
many.
back and look at it.
Yeah, well, I went back on the internet and looked at it because it's like,
Oh, using those internets. Oh,
yeah. For this game, I used it more than I want to admit, just because I was like busy in my own life, so this game took me like 3 months to complete. So there was like
yeah.
a lot of times where it was like weeks without playing, so it was even more difficult to keep things in order in my head.
That was a
Yeah.
hard one to remember. It kind of
Yes.
was. It was.
Yeah,
I don't think you were meant to remember it. I think you were meant to remember that diorama or model or whatever it was, and know that you had to find
Yeah.
that room again and look. That I think was reasonable. I don't think it's.
Yeah.
I don't think
What
the
great fun
intention.
that is.
I don't think. Well. it is fun because then you figure something out and it opens a
No,
door. I
no,
think that's cool.
no, no, no. You've already figured it out. Oh yeah, that mention that. You just don't remember the specific date. So let me go back and get like you're not figuring anything out at that point. You're just running around the map. So anyway, that was one other puzzle that I noted. And then one of them I'm trying to remember now is when you had to put that barcode like on the box with that machine.
Oh yeah, I
Like
got that. It
okay,
was. I think it redirected it on that like conveyor belt thing.
yeah. I don't know. That was kind of confusing to me.
That one I got.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really like. It was hard to grasp conceptually, but it was also kind of like, okay, you know, what else are you gonna do with it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It sort of goes back to like the puzzle games that we've said. It's like the only thing you could do with that label is slap it on a box. So you kind of
yeah,
know that that's what you got to do with it. It's not like you
yeah,
could like wrap it around your gun or put it on the wall. And like,
yeah. No, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but overall, there were a lot of puzzles. A lot of them were easier, but some of them
Yeah,
were causing me a lot of time. Cost me a lot of time.
yeah. I'd say for the most part that I liked them. One thing I didn't like was some of the items. Like you get the like that blue crest
mhm.
like multiple times. And
Yeah,
just like I don't know, they kind of come up with something else.
yeah. You need it as both Claire and Chris for different reasons or different parts.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we might as well get into the characters, and that will just have us discuss, I think, some of the story. But it's just a little bit of background. So we mentioned that you're Claire, you go to look for Chris, you get captured. Uh, you wind up meeting this character Steve, and I'm sure will be a lot of discussion about Steve in this podcast because you can't talk about Code Veronica without talking about Steve. Um, and then you're fighting your way through this. The sort of the administrator of this area is Alfred Ashford, and he is an interesting antagonist in this game. And we mentioned Wesker's in this game, so he's another antagonist. And you have Alfred's sister, Alexia, which is another interesting antagonist in this game as well. So you find out that the Ashfords sort of were early founders of Umbrella Corporation, and we know they're a biochemical manufacturer from the prior games. And Alfred sort of has this complex, and he's sort of mentally unstable, and that leads him to you know kind of pretend to be his sister Alexia at points because Alexia has been sort of almost like cryogenically frozen because she has this new T virus in her that is supposed to kind of grant her powers or whatever. And so she winds up becoming like the bad guy that you fight at the end that mutates into this hideous form. But throughout most of the game, Alfred's really the main protagonist.
antagonist.
Yeah, sorry, antagonist. Um, so what did you guys think of, you know, the characters in this game? We'll talk about the people first, and then we can talk about some of the monsters.
It's yeah. I mean, Claire was good. I feel like they kind of developed her character a little bit more from two, which was nice to see.
I just don't get why, and I feel like we've talked about this in the past too, but why she seems quite skilled at weapons and survival.
Yeah,
And
it
like it
never.
made sense when it was like police officers, but
Well, I think it
Yeah,
stands to reason that you know her brother was this special tactics operative, and they were close, so he could have imparted some of that knowledge for to her.
yeah. I mean, so the opening scene of this game is pretty cool. It's cool if you look at it in a vacuum. I think it does sort of paint Claire almost as this like super skilled, like almost kind of soldier spy kind of person. I mean, she does eventually get caught, but there's that cool scene where she like puts her hands up when she's confronted with like 20 people pointing a gun at her and then like falls to the ground and grabs her gun at the last minute and shoots this gas container and they all blow up. But so Yeah, I can see what you're saying, Pete. I don't know if they really explained that she has that level of expertise, but to Tom's point, I mean, first of all, it's just a video game. They needed a vehicle to make this go, and but yeah, she's definitely cool. I mean, she's cool. I don't know if she's the most interesting, or at least the character you would talk about most in this game.
What character would you talk most about?
Almost any of the other ones, I think.
Okay.
Alfred's pretty weird and interesting. I mean, Wesker's always kind of cool. I mean, and I think Steve just is just like ridiculous. Is probably the most ridiculous character in Resident Evil history. So, I think he's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, probably. I mean, in a series that's known for bad voice acting, I think he would have to take the crown.
I mean, and not just the voice acting. I think it's just the writing for him. It's like they made him such a whiny man baby,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But like,
but not just whiny in the sense of like his
yeah,
voice was whiny. Like, I mean, he was like throwing literal tantrums like in the middle of this.
Yeah,
When he's mad at her for a second, so he's just like shooting his gun into the wall. Like, I mean, like
yeah. I guess based on you know, his whole plot point, with his father and stuff, he could have been in a bad place mentally. That's making him act out and
yeah,
do stupid things like that.
yeah.
But
But
yeah, I mean, just yeah, I don't know, like
he just screws.
he's such like a jerk. Like I feel
Yeah,
like
I mean, he's clearly like a very young kid, not like 10 years old young, but like I don't know, he's probably like 18 maybe, and he's uh he's also a prisoner on this island because his dad ratted out or attempted to rat out someone at Umbrella for some of their doings. So, him and Claire meet up, and he's good at heart, but is very immature. Um, he like weirdly tries to kiss Claire when she's sleeping and all of that. So it's so he's kind of weird, but yeah, the voice acting is just very forced and odd, and he's just sort of a baby that screws things up at times. Though he does also save Claire a few times too, so he does make up for it.
yeah, he was he was an interesting character, and then you kind of like you wanted to like him, but he just never really gave you that chance to like
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
do you guys remember any corny lines? Because I don't, and I feel like the other couple of games that I'm familiar with from Resident Evil, there are lines that I remember and noted down for the other one we reviewed.
Well, there with Steve, I mean, he does say. I mean, it might not be a corny line, but there is that scene where it's like his zombified father is attacking Claire, and like he won't, and she's like trapped, and he won't shoot her, and then when he finally snaps out of it, he goes, "Father!" and then just shoots like 1,000 rounds into him. I don't know. That was maybe one of the funniest delivered lines in Resident Evil history.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, not exactly what I'm talking about, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't note down any. I mean,
Yeah, I feel like there weren't a lot of good ones in this game.
Yeah. Well, Barry wasn't in it, so I mean, he's usually the deliverer of the most iconic corny lines. So,
All
I
right, what other
yeah,
characters?
yeah. So, I mean, when you first meet Alfred, I think it's really cool. He's sort of on that like stairway, like perched stairway, and he has his like rifle with him, and he's sort of confronting Claire. Um, he's he speaks in a very haughty-taughty kind of voice. He's it gives the appearance of royalty and just sort of high class and all of that. And they certainly that really plays into what we were talking about before about like how lineage was so important in this game because his family has been here forever and they created this company and they have this mansion and this island and all of this. So it really plays into that. And they really just made him so along with all of that sort of you know stature, they also present him as sort of mentally unstable. Like he's the way he cackles, the way he laughs, the way you eventually find out that his sister Alexia really isn't there. Like you're led to believe that it's really the two of them as twins sort of running everything, but he's sort of playing both of them. So he's Alfred and sometimes he's just Alfred, and other times he's puts on a wig and lipstick and a dress, and he's Alexia. So it's he's clearly like obsessed with her and unstable, and really works in service of Alexia as opposed to himself even.
Yeah, I think his main reason for existing, at least that like what he felt was basically he felt that their father was like a screw up, and he wanted to restore honor to the Ashford name, and he thought that preserving Alexia and um you know having her reach her full potential was the way to do that, and he was going to be assisting in that.
Yeah. And we find out later that Alexia and Alfred were sort of like created using the virus. Um, and they wound up, especially Alexia, with like immense intelligence because of that. But as we find out later in the game, that she is sort of, has been in this test tube, sort of preserved for like the last 15 years, so that the virus would infect her, but not like completely take her over. And so of course, towards the end, she sort of, Alfred dies or is killed. Spoiler alert. And then um, Alexia is sort of this overpowered monster that becomes a your main antagonist. Um, and we'll get into her design a little bit in the battles with her, but there's also Wesker in this game, and he's the one who attacked the island and sort of caused all this mayhem because he had become aware that this new variant of the virus was in Alexia, and he was going to try to have Alexia come with her so that he could extract it or use it for his own purposes. So that's why he was on the island as well. And then, of course, him being on the island resulted in his interactions with Claire and Chris, and obviously, Chris is his big nemesis from the first game. So it's you know, kind of connected a lot of things.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly how Resident Evil 1 ended, but I think you as a player are led to believe that Wesker died there.
Yep.
Yeah,
He
so
gets
like
killed by like Tyrant, who
the
he was
tyrant
like,
kills him, yeah, and
yeah,
then I think the mansion blows up or something, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So like this is the first time you're kind of seeing him,
yeah.
well, first of all alive, but then like using all these like powers and what is like super speed and his quick reflexes and his eyes glowing red and all that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I
Yes,
mean that's kind of a big revelation in this
yeah,
game.
exactly. Because you think Wesker's done, and then he
Yeah,
he appears in this, and it's
yeah,
that's
then
why I think those cutscenes were added too to kind of really drive that home more than on the original cut of Code Veronica.
yeah, and then Wesker obviously goes on to become a villain in further games in the series, just cementing the importance of this game.
Yeah, he's always a thorn in Chris's side. So there's other minor characters, but I mean that really is like the four or five main characters. I mean, and then later you play as Chris, as so basically Chris gets called to the island by Claire, and that really doesn't make too much sense because it's like Claire, when they find out they have a connection to the outside, Claire says, "Oh, I'm going to contact Leon." But why not? I don't know. It's kind of weird. But then Chris shows up and gets to the island. But anyway, so then you play as Chris, and in that part you are sort of backtracking even more because you're kind of going through the same parts of the level again.
Yeah, I mean a lot of it had been dilapidated to the point where you couldn't, like at
Yeah,
least in that, was it that military training facility?
yeah. You don't have to backtrack as much as Claire did because it's getting destroyed. The self-destruct system had been activated, and um, self-destruct system has been activated, and
That's Resident Evil 2.
oh yeah, right. Um, so then he goes through there a little bit, and then eventually gets to Antarctica to meet up with Claire. So should we talk about some of the villains in this game?
Yeah, I think maybe enemies in general, and
Yeah,
yeah. So one thing I wanted to touch on was that there was a new enemy added into this game called the Bandersnatches.
right. That's the this game's version of Hunter version of Liquor, basically.
Well,
Like,
hunters were in this game too, but
oh, that's true. That's true.
yeah, I mean these guys, I didn't care for them that much because basically what their main attack was like they had these really long stretchy arms and they would be able to slap you from long distances. Um,
Yeah, and the problem with that is that sometimes they could hit you from off screen, which was
yeah,
annoying. That was
Yes.
really what the problem was.
that was
Um,
annoying, and I just felt like there wasn't much counterplay to it. Like
Had to get hit.
you either had to get hit or just like mag dump them with a strong weapon. But it had to be like a long. Like I felt like you couldn't even use the grenade launcher on them because you had to
No.
get too close. So.
Yeah, the grenade launcher for some reason like shoots like 2 feet in front of you
Yeah, yeah,
in this game. So I don't. We'll get into the weapons a little bit,
yeah,
but
yeah.
since we're talking about the enemies
So
now,
yeah, I wanted to call that out as
I thought
yeah.
the
one addition that I
animation
did not like.
I thought the animation of the Bandersnatch is where they would like sometimes they would like use their stretchy arm to like grasp onto uh, like an opposite wall and like pull themselves to that. So I kind of thought that was a cool thing that they did.
Yeah, and they could like climb walls.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
when
If
you
you,
there's one point where you're going up a
mhm.
staircase and then they would follow you up just by like and getting up there pretty much immediately. So
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I
it's
thought they
tricky.
were pretty cool, but yeah, the being hit off screen was a little bit annoying.
Yeah, there was one point with the banner. There's like two banner snatch. I think it's when you're on your way to is it the private residence or palace or something. One of those. Um,
Yeah.
so there's two of them there, and see, this was a part where I was like, I feel like I'm gonna be coming back here a few times, so let me just kill them. So I killed both of them, and then I went back, did some other thing that advanced the plot, some cutscene happened or whatever, and then I did have to go back, and I came back, and there's two more there.
Yeah.
That ticked me off so much.
That was something about this game that I didn't like. There were points where you would clear out an area and then as you press further, there would be more enemies there.
Yeah, did not like that either.
So, and of course, there were the regular zombies. I mean, I don't think we need to really discuss those much. I mean, it's kind of your standard fare from a Resident Evil game.
What about that zombie that was like I think it may have been like a doctor or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's like a doctor's sort of makeshift office, and
Yeah.
yeah. So that scene kind of calls into a number of things. There was a camera thing where it's like you leave that room and it shifts to behind the body bag that's on a gurney,
Yeah.
and then it moves slightly, and then when you come back in, he's like eating another zombie and then attacks you and is like faster than like Usain Bolt,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that one he got me a couple of times.
Yeah.
There were two minor type enemies that I wanted to bring up. So one is the bats, and you
Yes.
had to hold the lighter.
Well, you could hold a lighter, and I actually, this might be just knowledge from a prior playthrough, but I knew to do that instantaneously, like that. So, like, the only problem with that was that later in the game, if you did a side quest where you got the guy you initially meet, Rodrigo, the medicine, he would basically force a trade with you where you would leave the lighter with him, and he would give you a lockpick. But then, like, you would still have to encounter bats. It's just so much more useful to have the lighter,
I'm not
Oh,
sure about that.
yeah, the lockpick got you some good items.
Yeah,
I guess. But
but
anyway,
I
yeah,
didn't
the
use the
bats.
lockpick at all, and I didn't. I never played this game. I didn't know that you had to use the lighter, so I was like, what the heck is going on? Like there has to be a way to avoid this. So I just looked it up.
Well, you
I
could
mean,
kill him.
Yeah, I shot them all with the
Yeah.
handgun.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Oh,
kind of the thing with like these games. It's like you can't aim, so they kind of like help you out, I feel. So
yeah, yeah,
it's like not real aiming, but it's like they're above you. So just point anywhere up and you're gonna
right.
hit it.
Yeah, there's a trick. Like I think it was most effective when like you let them get close to you and then you like just shoot one handgun bullet and it kills.
But they were extremely annoying. And then
They were, yeah.
they were in like that. It's sort of like the private residence where you sort of see Alexia, quote unquote, and Alfred like for the first time. Not Alfred for the first time, but where you like hear him and quote unquote Alexia talking. Um, I think that's the part where it's like that long
Yeah, there's a
like
lot of bats. Yes.
staircase and there's a
Hmm.
Yeah,
ton
yeah.
of bats and like yeah, the
Yeah.
lighter is key. And
Yeah, it's so annoying.
I think I know what the second minor enemy you're going to talk about is, but go ahead because if it
You want
is,
to
it's
guess?
also very annoying. The moths,
Yes.
yeah, so annoying.
That
So
was
an
really annoying. Yeah.
that annoyed me way more than the bats because you had to go in that corridor with the moth like
Yeah.
800
Yeah.
times. So it was like,
And it was so dumb. It would plant the thing on your back,
well,
and
that was the most
then
annoying
you
thing
have to
about it.
wait a little bit, but you didn't want to keep going because you knew it was gonna
Right,
de-
because right,
detonate, whatever you want to call it.
yeah, yeah, because in that hallway with the way they sort of make it up to you a little bit is that they do have like a reusable blue herb
Yeah. Yeah, the
bin,
blue planter. Yeah.
yeah, in the planter.
Yeah,
So
but
like,
that was
but
annoying
yeah, it was
because
annoying because you had to like you couldn't. like it took a while to hatch on you. So like you would just be waiting in that card until it hatched and then use it and then go into the level at the next room, I mean, and then do whatever you had to do there, then go back out and then get it again. Just
Yeah,
so
and then you
bad.
would go to the planter, but then the moth would get you again. Like it was
Yeah.
just like a loop.
I don't think I went through that card once without getting infected.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was quite annoying. And if
well,
you
okay.
I can't confirm if it was here. You encountered the poison moth somewhere else or only over here? I think there was maybe one or two other spots. But anyway, I noted down that I killed one of them and then they reappeared,
Yeah,
like
in
when
the
I
hallway.
returned.
In the
So
hallway. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that
Yeah,
was
that was
also very
annoying.
annoying. Yeah,
All
so
right.
I had to bring up
Yeah,
those two.
yeah. It
So
seems kind of random how they would even latch onto you. Like sometimes you feel like you're past it, and then all of a sudden
yeah.
it's like just on you.
So
Yeah,
this
that's super
reminds me
annoying.
of another point. Like sometimes it was a little dumb, like you were being chased by an enemy or whatever, and you would like mash on the door real quick, like to kind of exit that room. Meanwhile, it's like they were like right there about to get you, and you had to open the door and get in. Like,
Yeah, well, that was sort of like a cheap thing in your favor in those old Resident Evil
yeah,
games, where it's like the minute you hit a door, it was like a safe zone.
Sometimes I would like enter a room or go through a door, and I didn't like how the zombies were situated, so I would just go back out and then go back in and try to get a better random placement of them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was good. All right. I really and then Tom mentioned that there were the hunters, and then there was like those like super hunters that were like even faster and I think can poison you with their scratches. They were like slightly different color than the traditional green ones. So those are in this game too. And they had the added feature of being accompanied by these robotic trackers that if you like wound up in their line of sight, that they would call the hunters to that area immediately. I found them pretty easy to avoid those trackers, but if you did get caught, it would bring like the hunters there pretty quickly.
Yeah, that was. I think they explained it by saying Wesker set up those trackers. Yeah, try and kill you. Yeah, I mean it was an interesting addition, I think.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think, but I other than those enemies, I think all of the other enemies involved boss battles, and we will discuss that when we come back. All right, today we're discussing Resident Evil Code Veronica. So for this week's mid-episode filler, would you rather question, we'd like to ask a little bit about the enemies in this game, and particularly the insect and animal creatures that you run into in this game. We would like to ask you, the listeners, what would be your least favorite of these creature enemies to run into if you were in this survival horror scenario? And those are the giant moth that lays eggs on you to hatch and poison you, the bats, no further description needed, or the giant spider. Give us your answers on our social media accounts, X and Instagram at Bros Boss Battles. That's BROS Boss Battles. Our YouTube page, same handle. Our website, brothersandbossbattles.com, or wherever you get this podcast. Looking forward to those answers. Now back to the regular show. All right, we're about to start talking about the boss battles in this game, which comprise a lot of the more interesting enemies. And the one I'd like to start off with is the enemy Nosferatu, which I thought was a pretty cool enemy. Turns out, and again, spoiler alerts, but this is the father of Alexia and Alfred. Uh, they sort of infected him purposely and sort of trapped him below one of the facilities in the game. And upon, I think it's upon the death of Alfred, he sort of, breaks out of that, right? Is that when he comes out of his sort of quote unquote prison?
I don't recall exactly.
Anyway, I mean that's not really important, but he's essentially infected with the T virus. He's sort of blindfolded, has his arms bound, um, and the way they present him is pretty cool. So when you first see him, Claire gains access to like this secret passageway, and there's this grated floor that you could see him, trapped. So that's the first encounter with him, and like Claire like slinks away, but as a player of this game that you're going to encounter him, and then you're finally with Steve, and you're about to escape. You're on a helipad, and it's snowy, so you can't really see too far in front of you. And then all of a sudden, coming up the stairs is this guy, Nosferatu, and he begins mutating at that point. This giant arm comes out of his back, and he slaps Steve off of the stage, and then you're left as Claire to have to fight him. So it's a pretty interesting fight. It's annoying at times. So the Nosferatu's main attacks are that he swings and has pretty far reach with this mutated arm coming out of his back, and then his blood is supposedly like poison now, so he emits this poison that can poison you. I mean, the way it's sort of presented in the actual battle though is that it's almost like these little fountains on the helipad of poison that's spraying up at you. So it doesn't like necessarily look like it's coming from him, but I think that's what it's intended to be. So what do you guys think of that fight?
It was pretty unique. I felt they give you the sniper rifle right before that,
Well,
and
you have to
after
use that, right? Or no?
No, you don't have to.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah, I
so
mean, I guess you're you know basically encouraged to use it because you can like pinpoint some. There was
he has an exposed heart basically
yeah. So
Oh,
in
you
his
yeah.
wanna
chest. So
you wanna
you
pinpoint
you
that and hit it.
Like
yeah,
his no.
you could kill him a lot quicker if you hit that specifically rather than using like a machine gun or a handgun that's just going to sort of hit anywhere. And what's cool about using the sniper rifle is that if you get the last hit on him with the sniper rifle, it kind of cuts to this sort of mini cutscene where it like shows Claire shooting him and then he, hitting him in the heart, this heart area, and then him dying. Uh, Another thing I learned from watching a playthrough on YouTube was that you also get one of those very quick like cutscene things if you kill him with your last hit coming from the knife. And essentially then Claire like stabs him in the heart. And it's sort of a similar setup and graphic to killing him with the sniper rifle, except, one's a bullet and one's the knife. But that was a pretty cool little thing there, just to get rid of him. I mean, it's not that hard of a fight. It's just you can't get close to him, but there's a
He can
ton
knock
of
you off he can
yeah,
knock you off the stage pretty easily. That happened to me a
yeah,
couple of times.
yeah. He
Yeah,
can
that
like
happened to me.
he can smack at you and knock you off, or pick you up and throw you like behind his back, and that could throw you off. Um,
Another cool thing about that fight is that and I found this out after the fact, but apparently there was like poison mists that come up.
well,
If
that's
you
what I was
like
talking about.
yeah, if you don't get hit by any of those, then like there's the part when you're playing as Chris where you have to find the serum for Claire.
Yeah,
Like that part you can just completely skip because
yeah. If she's not
she's not
poisoned,
poisoned. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's pretty good. So I mean, they really make you where you kind of have to use the sniper rifle because you can't get too close to him, and it's also extremely snowy, so it's hard to pinpoint him or especially his weak points, his heart, without using the sniper rifle. So but he's sort of squirming and moving around too, so it isn't really the easiest to get a clear shot every time. But I thought it was a cool character, and it's a cool way to sort of introduce you to another member of the family, albeit in this sort of mutated form. So that was one of the boss battles. Another boss battle is when Claire and Steve are escaping, right, on the one of the like a cargo jet or whatever it is, and you have to
That Steve, the 17-year-old, somehow knows how to fly.
right, yeah, he is flying. Well, a lot of people are pilots in Resident Evil and survival horror in general, but yeah. But anyway, there's a tyrant like monster that gets put onto the cargo hold that Claire has to fight uh, in this open cargo hold while the jet's in flight. And that's a pretty interesting battle too.
I found this one to be a lot more difficult than the previous one we just discussed.
Yeah, whenever they
Well,
have a fight like this, I'm always like, do you have to just wait and or like press this button to knock him out a bunch of times, or are you actually supposed to shoot him and, you know, weaken him to make him
Yeah,
easier to push out with
it's
the
it's a guessing game. That's what
uh,
this game is.
that's what life is, man. You're right.
but you can kill him just with the guns, right? But it takes like a ton.
Yeah, so I think when you push the button and the box hits him, like I think that does damage. And then obviously hitting him with ammo also does damage.
That it's a very tough fight because you're really in close quarters, and if he gets you in a corner, you like he swipes at you like faster than you can run around him. So like you have to kind of almost hope you have enough health or health items so that like you could sort of nudge your way. So like each time he hits you back, it's a little bit closer to where you actually will be able to run around him and then get on the other side of him, try to unload on him, and then eventually press that the crate drop thing that will knock him out of the cargo hold.
Yeah, the controls didn't make this fight any easier because like when he hits you, he can easily combo you,
Yeah.
but it's only easy for him to combo you because it's so hard to move out of his way with the controls.
Yeah, so that was a
Yeah.
tough
Doesn't
fight.
not necessarily this boss battle, but just in general, there was once or twice where I was kind of like trapped and cornered by like some of the enemies,
Hmm.
and like I just took hit after hit after hit, and like I couldn't get out.
Let's see what other big bosses are there in this. So you face after a pretty cool cutscene with Wesker and Alexia fighting, after Alexia comes out of her test tube thingy and transforms into this initial stage of monster. The two of them fight, and then Wesker sees this is when you're playing as Chris, and he sees Chris there, and he sort of derisively says, "Oh, Chris, you're one of my best men. You take care of this," and then he runs off. So Chris has to face Alexia, and in that battle, she's basically able to toss her own blood, which then ignites. So you're facing her in like the main hall of the mansion, um, which is a pretty big area, but she's able to cut off a lot of your routes with w firewalls, basically. And if you don't kill her fast enough, she's going to trap you. And then once she gets her hands on you, it's an instant kill. So you can kind of just like if you have a powerful enough weapon, you could unload on her pretty quickly, and it kills that version of Alexia pretty easily. But you have to be careful about the fire traps there.
Yeah, I was woefully unprepared the first time I went into this fight. So I was my health was on orange caution, and I didn't have any healing items with Chris at that time.
Mm.
Because this was right after you do a sequence with Claire. So
Right.
right when you finish that, it goes to this cutscene with Wesker and Chris, and then you're thrusted right into the boss fight. And all I had was the handgun and the shotgun, which wasn't the shotgun wasn't really ideal for this fight because you don't want to get too close to her.
See, I actually use the shotgun in this battle. I feel if you just keep unloading on her with the shotgun, it's not that hard. I mean, I think I saw online though, like someone used the Magnum and like killed her in 3 shots. I don't know if I even had the Magnum at this point, but just I did see that online.
Yeah, I ended up reloading an old save and I brought the bow gun with the explosive bolts.
Hmm.
Mm.
We'll get to that soon. But
I think I used the Magnum here, thinking that it was like the final boss.
that was silly of you. She was barely mutated at that point.
Well, yeah, true, but I thought she was gonna mutate right there and then.
Uh, so she doesn't. She kind of just like falls down, and then you continue on your way as Chris. Um, Eventually, you get to you meet up with Claire. You have to sort of save her. You play as her again, like very briefly, um, for a little sequence, and then you play as him as Chris again.
Well, I
Um,
wanted to touch on that sequence a little bit.
yeah, go ahead.
Also, this is where a friend of yours meets his untimely end.
All right, this is an important story point that we didn't pick up on yet.
So yeah, spoiler alert. So Steve ends up getting infected and with the virus and mutating into some monster. Um, so that part where you're running away from him, I don't know. Did you guys find it like kind of dumb too? Like it was to me, it felt impossible to not get hit.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it.
I
I
think you
think
had to get hit like twice.
I think it is impossible. I think the key to that is you need healing items. You need like at least two like combined herbs at that point.
Yeah.
If you don't, you basically can't beat it. Though I did see that there is this sort of like, I don't know, god tier level to beat him and not get attacked, where it's like as soon as he as soon as you take control of Claire again, you run around him and then proceed forward as you otherwise would do, as opposed to the way like 99% of normal players do it is just okay, he's mutated and attacking you, so you just turn and run, and he's swinging the axe and like he's gonna hit you. Like there's no way to around it. But if you run around him first and then come forward, it's like he's sort of like startled by that or whatever. Or it's just the programming of it, I guess. But like he then I don't think can catch you or like or maybe can only catch you once as opposed to twice. Which I
Oh.
like. I think if you just do it regularly, you have to get hit twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. So that
And
would mean
though,
you would only need one healing item.
yeah. But the other thing, there is another sort of way that it's sort of anticlimactic because it's like the music really gears up and he's like chasing you and your only option is to run. But if you do hit him with a powerful weapon, like if you have the grenade launcher, you could like hit him twice, take a few steps forward, turn around, hit him again, take a few steps forward, and then keep doing that sequence, and like he gets stunned enough where he can't hit you until you then like um fling yourself under the closing gate, and then the scene plays out as it otherwise plays out. So there is a
That's a
couple
little
of
cooler, right?
yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
cool, but it's all like that scene is meant to be like you're just running away. Like you're startled that this poor kid is now mutated and turns into this hideous monster, and it's just like you can't kill him as far as I know by shooting him. So it's really just to stun him. So it's like what do I want to waste bullets or do I want to waste healing items? But anyway,
Yeah.
after
So
that, Steve, like he's mutated. Alexia's, calls on this tentacle that she controls to basically trap Claire, and Steve breaks through the gate and has this axe, and like at the last minute, I guess realizes that it's still him inside, and this is still Claire. So instead of like chopping Claire's head off, he chops the tentacle, and then in response, Alexia basically has the tentacle punch a hole through him, and you know inexplicably turns from this monster back into like regular old Steve and then dies.
yeah, that was interesting. But also another like consequence of that was that Wesker was able to take Steve's body and get samples of the virus from him. So just,
Right.
another plot point there.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, um, Alexia, the final boss battle is against Alexia and a couple of forms of Alexia, and you kill her. So, I think that's was to be expected, and therefore, Wesker's whole point of being there to extract the virus from Alexia is now gone. But he still has a successful trip, let's say, because he's able to get Steve's body. So that sort of added insult to injury to Claire and Chris by the end of it. But that's how it played out. And the last battle against Alexia, I mean, she kind of, there's this sort of bug theme in this that just go and play it. I mean, it's sort of important, but it's there's this bug theme. So she turns into like this sort of like bug-like creature that can like shoot out other little bugs, and that was like a really annoying thing in that battle against her, where she like just shooting out like these little creatures that were like just nipping at your ankles and like preventing you from shooting and stuff like that. So that was annoying. And then once you beat that form, she turns into like this dragonfly thing, and you get a new weapon called a linear launcher that kills her in one shot. But she's fluttering around like a dragonfly, and it's not a huge hitbox. And then this gun, like you have to sort of like charge and shoot it. So it's not the easiest time to do it, but once you get her, it's game over.
Yeah, that was a pretty good fight. And I felt like it wasn't super easy. Like I had a bunch of Magnum ammo. So that obviously made it easier, but it wasn't like it's like, oh, let me just, rapid fire the Magnum and then she's dead in, 5 hits or whatever.
Yeah, I think I maybe had one or two Magnum bullets left, but here I relied more heavily on those arrows with the gunpowder.
Yeah. So let's quickly talk about those weapons. I mean, again, you have your standard pistol, shotgun, machine gun, um, sniper rifle, but then you do get a bow gun in this, and it's an interesting weapon. You get a ton of bowgun bolts, but it takes about like 25 bowgun bolts to kill one zombie in this game. So, you
Yeah,
get a lot.
they don't really do any like stagger, like any stagger damage. Like so they don't actually like, knock back the enemy.
No, yeah, you have to just keep. You can rapidly shoot it, but you really just have to keep going until the enemy falls down. However, you do get at times this bowgun powder, which turns about 10 at a time into these like fire powered bolts, which actually are pretty powerful and useful.
Yeah, that was my goat weapon in the game.
Yeah, they were good
I
against the
thought,
Bandersnatches.
yeah, they killed him, I think, in 2 hits, maybe three. But yeah, yeah, I ended up using that a lot,
Yeah, and
even
then
on like the hunters and stuff. So
yeah, yeah, it was hard to find like a ton of those that powder, but it was useful when you did. And then there was the linear launch that I mentioned, which you essentially use for one shot, or until you hit the final form of Alexia, and then it's again game over. I just said that like 5 minutes ago, but and then basically Chris and Claire again because they fly off on a jet. At least Chris is like sort of like a military guy, so it makes a little bit more sense. I mean, I don't know that he's too entrenched with the military at this point. He's still like a STARS member, but he could at least suspend some thought, and it's a little bit more reasonable that he might be a or have piloting skills. But they basically announce that they are seeking revenge against Umbrella, and then the game ends at that point.
then it's game over.
So any other like individualized parts of this game that we should talk about? I mean, I thought the sound was good, music was good, especially for that era of games.
I like the opening, like the main menu before you get to the main menu. It's like that, that very high energy
Yeah.
Opera.
song.
Yeah. Well,
No,
yeah, it was like,
no,
but
it was an opera, but
it wasn't because I thought it had like sort of like
oh, maybe
the
at one point, yeah. But I
yeah,
mean, just like the beginning, like as soon as you put the
yeah.
game on and it's like blasts you in your
I know
ears.
it really
Yeah.
it does. It was so much louder. I was like, oh man, I gotta lower this. They're gonna wake up the whole house. It's but this game just so like with its sights and sounds really played into that sort of European Gothic type of feel. Like there was a lot of operas. They had that sort of homemade nursery rhyme that was again I think lent itself to the whole lineage aspect of this and Alexia and Alfred being twins and the whole family sort of situation. um so that was interesting. There was a lot of sort of that operatic music
Yeah, I
to
think during the Alexia fight, there's like an
yeah,
opera thing.
yeah, so that was like really went to that European Gothic sort of vibe that they were going for in this. So all that was cool. I mean, I think that really lent itself to the game and made it unique. Like that really wasn't like, you coming off of Resident Evil 2 where you're in a city police station in a laboratory for most of it. So this was, it sort of harkened back to the mansion from Resident Evil 1, but I think even like it was that on steroids.
Yeah, it was cool, cool setting. Definitely differs from like the more American style of the other two games.
Yeah, definitely. It really lent itself. So,
I wanted to ask one question
yeah.
unrelated to that. Did you guys feel that you had a lot of ammo and or healing items left over when you beat the game? Like, did you feel like you either had a lot or like barely had any?
For ammo, I feel like I didn't use a lot of the launcher stuff. So the acid rounds and whatever,
Yeah,
whatever else.
they had those green BOW rounds. I didn't use them once.
Yeah. So I had a lot of those. I don't know if it was in the. Well, I guess it was in the box. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also you can get the submachine guns by killing the worm as Chris. So you end up
Yeah, I
like
didn't do that.
kind of saving, not really saving, but the guy Rodrigo
Yeah.
ends up giving you your lighter
Hmm.
or the lighter back, and then you use that to get the submachine guns.
Yeah.
So I did that, but I didn't use them once.
I'm not a big fan of the machine guns in these games. But there was one cool difference in this game where if you had the dual guns, if you had like which would put a gun in each hand, you could kind of shoot two different enemies at once, which like isn't really practical, but like it was sort of like a cool image of like shooting two different zombies that weren't next to each other.
Yeah, yeah, that was cool. I did that because with Claire early in the game, you dual wield the pistols, like
Mm, yeah. So
the semi. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, just
So
my point, like
the
yeah,
ammo felt plentiful.
yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna say to answer your question, Tom. the ammo I didn't find a problem with, and we've covered Resident Evil 2 remake on this, and I mentioned how the ammo was a big issue for me. I didn't find that in this game, but the healing I think I was pretty much very low on because again that second to last form of Alexia shoots out all those little like bug-like creatures, and they're just nipping at you the entire time, and that Alexia takes a lot of shots to kill, so they're nipping at you for a long time, and I just feel like I just had to continuously heal in that. And luckily I had enough to get through the battle, obviously, but I don't remember being left with much after that.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I don't feel like I necessarily played the game particularly well, but I feel like the amount of healing items was kind of just enough for me. And then back on the ammo, like maybe if you don't get the Magnum, you kind of at the end you're gonna need a whole lot more. I guess shotgun maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. Like so for someone who didn't get any of the extra guns, maybe to complete the entire game, it didn't feel like it was so plentiful.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Because I got all the optional weapons, so I guess that's why I felt I had a lot.
Yeah.
Do you guys have your stats?
I do.
I think.
I don't have them actually.
Oh man,
What were yours?
Tom, you want to go?
Yeah, so my total time was 9 hours, 56 minutes, and 56 seconds. Number of saves was 24, number of retries was 28.
Mhm.
That ended up with an F plus rank. No, it was E. Uh, an E, which I didn't even know existed. So I think
Yeah.
that's probably the lowest you can get.
Yeah, I think so.
That's funny.
I read that in order to get the highest ranking, you have to not save and not or you have to definitely not die. Um, and I either minimal or no saves.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
buy that. I mean, I wasn't trying to get a high score here, you know, in
Yeah.
fairness to myself, but yeah,
Yeah, so I got a D rank. I mentioned I did use a walkthrough a fair bit, but the time it took me was 14 hours and 10 minutes. So like
Yeah, it definitely didn't take me
50%
that long.
50% more than Tom.
damn with
Yeah.
the
You know?
with the walkthrough.
Yeah, yeah. So that goes to show I didn't just okay. What's next in the walkthrough? Like I did try a little bit to figure stuff out. But number of saves was 31 and retries was 14.
Oh, that's not bad.
That's pretty good with the retries.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I had
Uh,
one. Well, actually,
yeah. Go
two
ahead.
other quick things before we go to
Go ahead.
final thoughts. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because we were talking about the puzzles, and I wish I saw this earlier, but I had noted down like a whole bunch of puzzles, and there was two that I bolded. One on like the good end, this was my favorite, and then one on the lame end. So the lame one was um the valve handle thing to make it an octagon, which Tom mentioned. But my favorite puzzle, so this is why I brought this up, 'cause I wanted to mention this, was remember when they had like the oil tanks and you had like the three liter or gallon, whatever it was, in the five, and you had to fill up seven into the 10. I thought that
You
was cool. That was my
you
favorite one.
you love these math-based puzzles.
That was
There
like
was
the cave, right?
the
With the
cave had one
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, with like the jugs of water or something
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
had to balance.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so I really like that one. And the other thing I wanted to mention, and I've been like waiting for weeks to bring this up, but do you guys know of the special edition Dreamcasts? So they had like a Stars edition, which was like kind of blue, and only 200 were made.
Oh, that's
And there was
cool.
a Claire edition, and only 1,800 were made.
Oh, wow. That would have been fun.
Yeah, I'm still not clear. I think all or most were Japanese versions, but I did a quick scan online, and like there was one for 18 grand.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I
The,
saw one I think for 10 grand.
oh, yeah. Oh,
I
well.
think that was the Claire one, so it was a little more.
Yeah.
That's why those listings are still up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true.
If it
Yeah.
was a reasonable price, people would have bought it already.
Yeah.
yeah, it would have been cool to have, but
Yeah. Especially for this series. Like sometimes you see those special edition consoles. I'm like, I don't really like this game. It's
yeah,
like, but for a Resident Evil thing, it would have been awesome. But oh well.
yeah. And also it's Dreamcast. I feel
Yeah.
like that's kind of cool. That
Yeah. Yeah.
there's not that many of those out there either.
Well, it made this category of for us of games initially on the Sega Dreamcast. So,
Yeah.
all All right, let's do our final thoughts and wrap this up. Tom, why don't you go first this time?
Sure. So I love Resident Evil and I love this game. I thought it was great. Um, a little bit different from the previous games in the series, but still very good, and they kept all the things that make the series great, and I felt it kept those and expanded upon those. There were some things like that we mentioned that were a little annoying. Like, I mean, I don't even want to say some of the puzzles because in a game like this that has a bunch of puzzles, you're gonna get some that are misses. Yeah, that's just how it goes. But some stuff with like the inventory when switching characters, I think they could have kind of. I don't think they perfected that in this game. But aside from that, I still really liked it. I definitely think it's worth a play if you're into Resident Evil, and maybe you didn't get a chance to play this one because it was initially released on the Dreamcast, and as we know, the Dreamcast didn't sell all that well. So the game is widely available now, though. So due to ports and remasters, so go pick it up if you haven't played it, and I think you'll like it.
All right, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, this is a definite recommend for me. I Resident Evil is great. I love Resident Evil as well, and this is such a good underrated Resident Evil game. And I feel like a lot of people sort of think it's I've heard on the internet like it's sort of weird and has these weird aspects to it. And I'm not sure if they mean just sort of the gameplay or whatever else they're talking about, but the gameplay is good old traditional Resident Evil in my opinion. And perhaps the best thing about this game is that it really starts to expand on the whole Resident Evil lore and story building. And it has this Claire is obviously a great protagonist. You have a whole brother sister duo, which is a cool little uh, twist in this game, because you know of the existence of these two, but they never really work together. And in this game, they do. You have sort of this maniacal bad guy in Alfred who is different in the sense that of other enemies in the Resident Evil series is that he never really turns into a monster himself, but he's still, at the control board of all of these crazy things that are happening to Rockford Island, this island that you're on, as well as all of the monsters that Claire is uh, encountering. So I think he's just a great character. I love the whole gothic feel. I love the whole uh, exploration of the Ashford's lineage and how that affects the larger Resident Evil story, and then this one specifically. Um, and it's probably up until this point was the creepiest. Up until this point of this game's release was the creepiest Resident Evil that there was. So just cementing it as a top tier survival horror game. So loved it and definitely recommend it. Pete, why don't you take us home?
All right, so while I didn't really have a lot of fun playing this game, I could see why others would. So, kind of for the first time on Brothers and Boss Battles, I feel like recommending this game or not seems kind of pointless to me. So, if you're the gamer who would probably like a decent Resident Evil game, but for some reason haven't gotten around to playing this game, then you'll probably get enjoyment out of this game. And if you're maybe someone like me who is the type of gamer who probably, wouldn't really like a decent Resident Evil game, then don't play this game. I think that's the best advice I could give.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to this episode of Brothers and Boss Battles, a video game showdown. Check us out on Instagram and X at Bros Boss Battles. That's BROS Boss Battles. Check out our website, brothersandbossbattles.com. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you get this podcast. Next episode, we will be discussing our third game in the games that initially released on the Sega Dreamcast to round out this category. Be sure to check us out. And until then, have a good one.